"I don't believe it," muttered Gordon furiously. "What's Thomas got that an important engine like me hasn't? Tell me that. Gallivanting off to museums. Bah! He is old," said James. "If the Fat Controller says he can be a museum piece, why should we worry?" "It's not fair, though," grumbled Henry. For a chance like this, he wouldn't have minded being a museum piece himself. The jealous engines all ignored Thomas when they saw him at the junction. Thomas didn't care. He was too excited. "Why me?" Thomas asked Percy and Toby. "Fancy the National Railway Museum people at, where is it, York, wanting me to go there? They've never even seen me." "Yes, they have," said Percy. "On television," added Toby. "The Fat Controller told us about it." He and Percy wanted to go with Thomas, but they knew that someone had to stay and run the branch line while he was away. "How much longer till we go?" Thomas asked his driver every morning. "One day less than when you asked before," laughed his driver. "Anyone would think you wanted to be a museum piece." Thomas grinned. "Gordon, Henry and James are just jealous," he chuckled. "Who else is at this museum? Is Flying Scotsman there, or Duck's friend, City of Truro?" "We shall have to wait and see," said the fireman. "I'll be very surprised if there isn't someone there that you can remember from the old days." And that, of course, made Thomas more excited than ever. At last the day came. A large crowd came to the junction to see Thomas off, and the Fat Controller was there too. "Goodbye, Thomas," he said. "Enjoy yourself and be a credit to our railway." Everyone gave 3 cheers and Thomas set off. They ran across the island and over the bridge leading to the other railway. It was a slow journey, but at last they reached a place Thomas's driver called Carnforth, where they rested for the night in a big shed. Next day they went on. At Skipton, Thomas stopped for a drink and to let a goods train overtake him. While they waited, it began to rain. In a signal box a little way ahead, the signalman opened his level crossing gates for Thomas and set his signals to clear. Suddenly he heard a crack and then a rattle from the level crossing. The lock on a gate had broken and the wind was swinging the gate across the rails. Steam appeared above the trees as Thomas drew near. "Wow!" exclaimed the signalman, and quickly resetting the signal to danger, he ran to mend the gate. Thomas had never felt happier. His fire was bright and even the rain didn't depress him. They neared a signal. Its arm was up, showing that the line ahead was clear. Away we go, puffed Thomas happily. He was just passing the signal when he heard a clang as the signal arm fell to danger. "Whoa, Thomas!" cried the driver and put the brakes hard on. "What?" Thomas began, but then he saw just in front a heavy level crossing gate swinging towards him across the line. The signalman tried to stop it, but the gate was wet and it slipped from his hand. "Oh!" groaned Thomas as he skidded along the rails. "Help! I must stop!" "Ouch!" said Thomas and stopped. The signalman ran to his telephone and then directed Thomas into a siding where an inspector examined him. His buffer beam was bent and one of his buffers was broken. "You can't go on like that," said the inspector. "Not on the railway anyhow." "But I'm supposed to be in York tomorrow," wailed Thomas. "I know that," said the inspector. "Never mind, leave it to me and I'll see what can be done." And with that, Thomas had to be content. Thomas had to stay in the siding for the rest of the day. His fire went out and he grew colder and colder. The rain fell more heavily, and what had begun as a splendid day began to turn into a disaster. "I wish I was in my nice warm shed," he said to himself miserably. At last the inspector returned. "Cheer up, Thomas," he said. "You'll be at the museum tomorrow, and they have promised to mend your front end in their workshop." "Thank you, sir," said Thomas. "But if I can't run on rails, how can I get there?" "It's all fixed," replied the inspector cheerfully. "A lorry is coming for you in the morning." Thomas was horrified. "A lorry?" he stammered. "That's right," said the inspector. "It'll be here at 8 o'clock sharp." Thomas slept badly that night. He kept wondering what Gordon, Henry and James would say if they knew he had finished his journey on a lorry. He almost thought he could hear them laughing. Next morning, the driver and fireman came early. A diesel shunter came to push Thomas out of his siding and along towards the road, where they found the lorry waiting. A steel cable was fastened to his coupling. The lorry driver started a winch, and in no time at all, it seemed, Thomas was perched on the lorry. How undignified, he thought. But he found, as they went along, that he had a marvellous view of the countryside, and time to enjoy it too. But Thomas soon began to feel bored. At last, houses began to appear on either side of the road. "Perhaps this is York," thought Thomas hopefully. It was, but the driver was unsure of his way. He parked the lorry and went to find a telephone. A man wearing a flat-topped cap with a yellow band round it came up to Thomas. "Hello," said Thomas. Said the man. He wrote something in his notebook and went round to the front of the lorry. When the lorry driver came back, Thomas heard him say something, then slammed the cab door crossly. Soon they reached a large building with rails running into it. Thomas was unloaded and the lorry drove away. Thomas looked about him. He had arrived. When his driver and fireman came, Thomas told them about the man with the flat cap. They laughed loudly. "How do you do it, Thomas?" spluttered the driver when he could speak. "That will make the Fat Controller's day." Thomas booked for parking.
Lots of people travel to the big station at the end of the line. Engines from the other railway sometimes pull their trains. Gordon was talking one day to one of these. "I remember going to London. Do you know the place? The station's called King's Cross." "King's Cross?" snorted the engine. "London's Euston. Everybody knows that." "Rubbish," said Duck. "London's Paddington. I know. I work there." They were still arguing when the other engine went away. "Stupid thing," said Gordon crossly. "I've no patience." "Stupid yourself," said Duck. "London's Paddington. Do you hear?" "Stop arguing," James broke in. "You make me tired. You both agreed about something anyway." "What's that?" "London's not Euston," laughed James. Gordon rolled away, still grumbling. "I'm sure it's King's Cross." One day he pulled the express to the station as usual. His fireman uncoupled the coaches and he ran onto his siding to wait till it was time to go home. The coaches waited and waited at the platform, but their engine didn't come. A porter ran across and spoke to Gordon's driver. "The inspector's on the platform. He wants to see you." He came back in a few minutes looking excited. "Hello," said the fireman. "What's happened?" "The engine for the express turned over when it was coming out of the yard. Nothing else can come in or out. They want us to take the train to London. I said we would if the Fat Controller agreed, and he said we could do it. How's that?" "Fine," said the fireman. "We'll show them what the Fat Controller's engines can do." "Come on," said Gordon. "Let's go." He rolled quickly over the crossings and backed onto the train. It was only a few minutes before the guard blew his whistle, but Gordon thought it was ages. found that London was a long way away. "Come on," he called to the coaches. "Come on, come on, come on." "We're going to town, we're going to town," sang the coaches slowly at first, then faster and faster. Gordon had to work harder than ever before. "Never mind," he puffed. "I like a good long run to stretch my wheels." But all the same, he was glad when London came in sight. The fat controller came into his office next morning. He looked at the letters on his desk. One had a London postmark. "I wonder how Gordon's getting on," he said. The station master knocked and came in. "Excuse me, sir, have you seen the news?" "Not yet. Why?" The fat controller took the newspaper. "Good gracious me," he said. "There's Gordon. Headlines too. Famous engine at London Station. Please call to control crowds." The fat controller read on, absorbed. Gordon returned next day. The fat controller spoke to his driver and fireman. "I see you had a good welcome in London." "We certainly did, sir. We signed autographs till our arms ached, and Gordon had his photograph taken from so many directions at once that he didn't know which way to look." "Good. I expect he enjoyed himself, didn't you, Gordon?" "No, sir, I didn't." "Why ever not?" "London's all wrong," answered Gordon sadly. "They've changed it. It isn't King's Cross anymore. It's St. Pancras."
Thomas the tank engine is very proud of his branch line. He thinks it's the most important part of the whole railway. His two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, agree with him. Annie can only take passengers, but Clarabelle can take passengers, baggage, and the conductor. They are both old and need new paint, but Thomas loves them very much. As they run backwards and forwards along the line, they sing songs to each other. When Thomas starts from a station, he sings, "Oh, come along, we're rather late. Oh, come along, we're rather late." And the coaches sing, "We're coming along, we're coming along." They don't mind what Thomas says to them, because they know he is trying to please Sir Topham Hatt. And they know, too, that if Thomas is cross, he's not cross with them. One day they had to wait for Henry's train, which made Thomas very cross. "How can I run my line properly if Henry is always late? He doesn't realize that Sir Topham Hatt depends on me." Thomas whistled impatiently. He wanted to leave, but he had to wait for Henry's passengers. At last, Henry came. "Where have you been, lazybones?" asked Thomas. "Oh dear, my system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer," moaned Henry. "Rubbish," said Thomas. "You're too slow. You need exercise." The conductor blew his whistle, and Thomas started so quickly that he left him behind. The conductor waved his red flag to stop Thomas, but he was well on his way, steaming out of the station.
Come along, puffed Thomas. But
Clarabelle didn't want to come. "I've lost my nice conductor. I've lost my nice conductor," she sobbed. Annie tried to tell Thomas what had happened. "We haven't a conductor. We haven't a conductor." But he was hurrying and wouldn't listen. Annie and Clarabelle tried to put on their brakes, but they couldn't without the conductor. "Where is our conductor? Where is our conductor?" they cried. But Thomas didn't stop till they came to a signal. "Bother that signal," said Thomas. "What's the matter?" "I don't know," said his driver. "The conductor will tell us in a minute." They waited and waited, but the conductor didn't come. "Peep, peep, peep! Where is the conductor?" whistled Thomas. "We've left him behind," sobbed Annie and Clarabelle together. Everyone looked, and there he was, running as fast as he could along the line with his flags in one hand and his whistle in the other. He was very hot, so he had a drink, then told them all about it. "I'm very sorry," said Thomas. "We all make mistakes," replied the conductor. "Look, the signal is down. We can go. Let's make up for lost time." Annie and Clarabelle were so pleased to have their conductor again that they sang "As Fast As You Like, As Fast As You Like" to Thomas all the way. They reached the end of the line quicker than ever before.
It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling extra pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either," added Percy. Well, anyway," huffed Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for a really useful engine. Everybody knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was filling his trucks filled with coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Watch out for those silly cars," he said. Go on," muttered the cars. "And by the way," went on Thomas, "those buffers aren't look very safe to me." The last load poured down. "Help! Help!" cried Thomas. "Get me out!" Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. "Ha ha!" chuckled Percy. "You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful." "I'm not disgraceful," choked Thomas. "You did that on purpose. Get me out." It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't ready in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. Poor Thomas, whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking that he made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his cars from the junction. The cars were heavy and Percy was tired. Have a drink, said his driver, then you feel better. The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. Oh, wailed Percy. Help! The buffers were broken and Percy was wheel deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. Now Percy had learned his lesson too, he chuckled to himself. That night the two engines made up their quarrel. I didn't cause your accident on purpose, Thomas, whistled Percy. You do know that, don't you? Of course, replied Thomas, and I'm sorry I was cheeky. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal.
Excited. There were to be some special rail tours to the seaside, and no one knew which engine would be chosen to pull them. It ought to be me, observed Mallard. After all, that seaside place helped to pay for my repairs. The others thought someone else should have a chance. Thomas knew he would not be chosen, but he enjoyed listening to the others arguing. He was pleased in the end when it was decided to give the trips to Green Arrow. When Green Arrow returned from the first tour, he said he had never seen so many people. Soon there was talk of putting on extra trains, but this was not possible. All we can do is add extra coaches, they said. But then Green Arrow can't pull a train that heavy on his own. Of course I can, he scoffed. My brothers and I did during the war. Can I help? Asked Thomas. The man in charge stared. I don't see why not, he said. In the morning, Thomas's fireman arrived early. Thomas's fire was lit, and while the warmth crept through his boiler, the fireman made sure all his moving parts were well oiled. Behind, Green Arrow was being prepared too, and when they were both ready, they set off to find their coaches. The station platform was jammed with an admiring crowd, which didn't seem to get any smaller, even after a trainload of people were in their seats. Thomas was coupled in front. He was pleased. He liked to see where he was going. At the seaside station, Thomas was turned round so that he could go in front again. After a rest, the engine set off once more. A ruined abbey stood at a place where the line curved beside a river. A crowd had gathered to wave and cheer, but Thomas wasn't watching them. Looking ahead, he had seen something strange. Beep, beep, stop, stop, he whistled in alarm. The train was heavy and hard to stop, but they managed it just in time. Now everyone was able to see that in front of Thomas, the rail near the river was lower than the one on the other side. "The water has undermined the embankment," said the inspector. "I'll go to the signal box and sort things out." Buses came for the passengers, but it was late before the men decided it would be safe to use the other track. Together, the engines pushed the coaches back to a crossover. On his own, Thomas slowly crept past the landslip. Then, very carefully, Green Arrow pulled the empty coaches by, and together they brought the train back to York. A few days later, a party of important-looking people came into the museum. One was the man in charge, and behind him was the Fat Controller. "Oh dear," thought Thomas, "they've come to take me away for frightening that child." But the Fat Controller was smiling. The man in charge held up his hand for silence. "Thomas," said the man in charge, "your controller told us you are a really useful engine. He is right. For saving a nasty accident the other day, we have decided that you should become an honorary member of the National Railway Collection. This special plate will remind you of your visit to us. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine. Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! The noise nearly raised the roof." "Well done, Thomas," smiled the Fat Controller. "I knew you would be a credit to our railway."